The ocean has a way of making you feel like you're the first person to ever truly see it, even when you know, intellectually, that you're standing on the shoulders of thousands of years of sailors and fishermen and dreamers. But when I stood on the deck of the DSSV pressure drop that morning, looking down at the turquoise water of the Pacific, I knew I was about to experience a silence that no one before me had ever quite known. The air was thick with the smell of salt and diesel and the peculiar, sharp tang of ozone from the ship's electronics. The sun was a white-hot coin in a cloudless sky, and it felt like the whole world was holding its breath, waiting for the precise moment I would descend into the deepest crevice of its skin. I remember the sound the hatch made when they sealed it, a soft, final click, a sound that was less a slam and more a promise, the last whisper of a world I knew, and the first audible seal of a world I could not yet imagine. Inside the titanium sphere, the silence was absolute. It wasn't the quiet of a library or the hush of a snowy night. It was a dense physical thing, a pressure not just on my ears but on my very being. The sphere, no wider than a small car, was my entire universe now. My breath, the faint hum of the life support systems, the occasional, almost imperceptible crackle of the carbon fiber hull as it adjusted to the temperature, these became the only sounds in existence. I could feel my own heartbeat, a rhythmic thump that was both reassuring and terrifying, a reminder that I was a fragile, warm-blooded creature in a machine we had barely learned to build. Below me lay Challenger Deep, the southern terminus of the Mariana Trench. Nearly 11 kilometers. The number on the briefing papers had been abstract, an equation to be solved, a feat of engineering to be checked off a list. But when you're looking at the digital depth counter, watching it climb past 4,000 meters, then 5, 7, 9, the numbers cease to have meaning. They become just a sequence of glowing red digits, a countdown to nothing. I was leaving the world behind. Not in a metaphorical sense, not in the way you feel when you get on a plane and leave your troubles on the ground. I was physically, fundamentally, leaving the sunlit world, the world of waves and wind and birdsong. I was falling into a place where the sun had never shone, a darkness so profound it had its own kind of substance. The descent took hours. I don't think any amount of training can prepare you for that. You sit in that small, perfectly calibrated sphere, and you watch the world outside change from a vibrant, swirling blue to a deep, mysterious indigo, and then, slowly, to a black so complete it felt like a physical pressure on my eyes. I had turned off the external lights for a time, wanting to experience the true essence of the deep, and it was then I understood, in a way no textbook had ever taught me, that I was voyaging into a primal realm. This was the abyss, the great unknown that has haunted the human imagination since we first looked out to sea. It was the place of leviathans and ancient monsters, the bottom of the world, the final frontier. Through the tiny, thick quartz viewport, I could see the last flickers of what is known as the twilight zone. Bioluminescent creatures, like living stars, drifted past. A jellyfish, its bell glowing a faint, ethereal green, pulsed by with a slow, hypnotic grace. It looked like a ghost, a figment of a dream, a silent visitor from another dimension. They were beautiful, of course, but they also served as a stark reminder of my own isolation. These creatures were born to this darkness, they were a part of it. I, on the other hand, was an intruder, a visitor from another world, sealed in a bubble of my own atmosphere. It was a humbling thought, a stark reminder of how alien our own planet can be. And then they were gone. The glow of the life forms faded, and I was surrounded by absolute, impenetrable blackness. The only light was from the small LED display screens in the capsule, illuminating my hands, my knees, the instruments that were keeping me alive. I felt a surge of what I can only describe as primal fear. It was not a fear of drowning, or of the pressure crushing me, but a far deeper, more ancient terror. It was the fear of the unknown, the fear of the void, the fear of a place so utterly inhospitable to life that it had remained untouched for billions of years. My mind, desperate for any stimulus, began to play tricks on me. I saw shapes in the darkness, fleeting shadows that weren't there. I imagined the hull groaning, the sound of a single hairline fracture that would spell my doom. But then, the external lights came on. I had been so focused on the darkness that I hadn't noticed the pilot, a man named Dr. Liam Croft, who had made this descent over a dozen times, give the signal. The beam, a powerful focused cone of white light, cut through the water like a sword. For a moment, there was nothing but a blizzard of detritus. Marine snow, they call it, the constant slow-motion rain of organic particles from the surface. It looked like a snow globe, a silent whiteout storm in the deep. And then, I saw at the bottom, it was not the jagged, terrifying abyss I had constructed in my imagination. It was not the fiery, churning hellscape of myth. It was a soft, beige plain, rippled like a desert after the wind had passed over it. It was a landscape of gentle curves and shallow valleys, dotted with the burrows of animals no one has named. The sediment was fine, almost like ash, and it had settled into an undulating pattern that was both alien and strangely familiar. It looked like a lunar landscape, a world of silence and stillness, a place that seemed to be holding its breath. The landing was gentle, a soft crunching sensation that vibrated through the hull. I had arrived. I was the first human to reach the deepest point of the ocean in a submersible that was not just a one-off prototype, but a vehicle capable of repeated scientific dives. I had done what so many had dreamed of, and I was alive. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated triumph, and then the real wonder began. The sediment on the floor was not empty. As I looked closer, I could see the delicate, intricate patterns etched into it by the movement of unseen creatures. There were trails, like the tracks of a tiny snail, leading from one burrow to another, and there, right in front of the viewport, was life. A tiny, translucent creature, no bigger than my thumb, drifted past. It was an amphipod, a type of crustacean, but it was unlike any I had ever seen. Its body was so clear I could see its internal organs, a complex network of tubes and sacs, pulsing with a faint, rhythmic energy. It seemed indifferent to me, a minuscule spaceship in an infinite ocean, going about its daily business, as if a god hadn't just descended from the heavens to peer into its world. It was a creature of pure resilience, a testament to the incredible adaptability of life. It existed in a world of crushing pressure, near-freezing temperatures, and perpetual darkness, and it was thriving. I thought about the engineers who spent years calculating whether the sphere I was sitting in would hold. They had tested it, simulated it, and worried over every single weld and seal. Their work, their dedication, had made this moment possible. I thought about the generations of oceanographers, the men and women who had dedicated their lives to understanding this place, mapping the trench, and theorizing about its secrets. They had painted this place with their minds, but now I was seeing it. I felt a profound sense of gratitude. I wasn't just a man in a bubble. I was a representative of all of humanity, a set of eyes for the species, a moment of collective achievement. And I thought about how much of our own planet is exactly this. Not hostile, not empty, simply unreachable, without machines we have barely learned to build. We know more about the surface of Mars than we do about the deepest parts of our own oceans. This vast, incredible world, teeming with life and history and secrets, lies just beneath the waves, waiting. It is a place of immense pressure, both physical and metaphysical. It is a place that forces you to confront your own insignificance, and at the same time your own immense potential. The silence was different now. It was no longer a void, it was a canvas. I could feel the weight of the water, the immense pressure pushing against the hull, a force so powerful it could crush steel like paper, but I wasn't afraid. I was in awe. The hull creaked and groaned as it settled, a symphony of stress and resilience that was, in its own way, beautiful. It was the sound of human ingenuity defying the impossible. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, simply staring. I watched the slow drift of the marine snow, the gentle sway of a sea cucumber that looked like a purple, fleshy flower, and the mysterious tracks in the sediment that hinted at a world of activity I could barely comprehend. The thrusters hummed to life. It was time to go. The climb back toward the surface was, in many ways, more difficult than the descent. I was leaving this incredible alien world, this place of pure discovery, to return to the familiar chaos of the surface. It felt like waking from a dream of such vivid detail and profound beauty that you desperately want to hold on to it, but it slips away the moment you open your eyes. The depth counter began to tick down, the numbers receding, and as they did I saw the water change color. It was a slow, beautiful gradient. The absolute black gave way to an impossible inky blue, then a deep midnight blue, then a vibrant electric blue. And finally, the warm, welcoming turquoise of the surface. The moment the capsule broke the surface, the world exploded with sound. The slosh of waves against the hull, the cry of seabirds, the distant hum of the support ship's engines, the chatter of the crew on the radio. It was a cacophony, a beautiful, overwhelming symphony of life after the profound silence of the deep. The hatch was unsealed and the sunlight flooded in, so bright it made my eyes water. I took a deep breath of the salty, humid air, and it tasted sweeter than any air I had ever breathed. As I was helped out of the capsule, the crew was cheering, clapping me on the back. They were asking questions, but the words didn't register at first. My mind was still down there, on that soft beige plain, in the company of those silent, nameless creatures. I had seen the heart of the ocean, and it had changed me. The journey back to land was a blur of debriefings, medical checks, and press conferences. I spoke about the engineering, the scientific data, the potential for new discoveries. But what I didn't tell them, couldn't tell them, was the feeling of having touched something sacred, something profound. The feeling of a place so vast and silent and old that it made human history seem like a single, fleeting heartbeat. Even now, years later, I often find myself thinking of that moment. I'll be walking down a busy street or sitting in a quiet room, and I'll be back there, in that small titanium sphere, watching the dark water flow past. The memory isn't just a visual one, it's a feeling. It's the feeling of being utterly alone, and yet profoundly connected to the entire world. It's the feeling of facing your deepest fear and finding not a monster, but a mirror. It's the feeling of looking into the heart of the unknown and seeing, reflected back, the boundless curiosity and relentless spirit that defines what it means to be human. The ocean isn't a place of emptiness. It's a place of endless potential, a story that is still being written, a mystery that calls to us from the depths. And I was lucky enough to have read one of its most profound chapters, chapter written in silence and darkness, and the soft beige glow of an undiscovered world. The first time I turned the submersible's lights off on purpose, my hands shook. It wasn't the cold, though the titanium hull was leaching the warmth from the air inside, and it wasn't the pressure, though we were already 600 meters down and the water outside was pressing with a force that would have turned a steel barrel into a crumpled can. It was the sheer, vertiginous audacity of the act itself. For hours, we had descended through the sunlit layers, the light fading from a brilliant life-giving blue to a pale, watery aquamarine, then to a deep, somber indigo that felt like the color of twilight itself. Now, with the flip of a switch, I was about to extinguish our only tether to the world I knew, to plunge us into a darkness so profound it had a physical weight. My pilot, a woman named Elara, who had spent more time in these deep zones than anyone I knew, gave me a calm, reassuring nod. "Give your eyes 10 minutes, she said, her voice a steady murmur through the headset. "Don't fight it. Just let the dark come in." Her words were a mantra, a simple instruction that I clung to as my thumb hovered over the toggle switch. The hum of the submersible systems was a constant, low thrum, a reminder that we were not dead, just suspended. And then I did it. I flipped the switch. The darkness that followed was not a simple absence of light. It was an active, living thing. It was the deep, velvety black of a cave, of a closed box, of a place where no photon had ever dared to tread. It was a pressure not just against my eyes, but against my very soul, a suffocating blanket that seemed to smother all thought. For a long, agonizing moment, there was nothing, just the sound of my own breathing, the faint, rhythmic thump-thump of my heart, and the distant, almost imperceptible groan of the submersible's hull settling. I felt a surge of panic, a primal biological instinct to reach out and turn the lights back on, to restore order, to banish the chaos. But I remembered Elara's words. I forced my hands to stay still, to rest on my knees. I closed my eyes, and then, slowly, I opened them. And what came was not blackness, it was a universe. It was the night sky, but inverted, a cosmos of ethereal, drifting stars that pulsed and swirled in a silent, liquid dance. The darkness I had feared was merely a canvas, and on it, life had painted its own masterpiece of light. The first thing I saw was a single tiny point of blue, a cold, steady spark that hovered for a moment, then winked out. Then another green, this time closer, that streaked past the viewport like a miniature comet. My eyes, still adjusting, began to pick out more and more details. The darkness was not empty. It was teeming with silent, shimmering life. A jellyfish, translucent and ethereal, drifted into view. It was a being of pure grace, its bell a delicate, silken dome that pulsed with a slow, hypnotic rhythm. But it was the trail it left behind that stole my breath. As it moved, a cascade of blue fire streamed from its trailing tentacles, a rope of living light that unfurled in its wake, illuminating the dark water like a ghostly firework. The light was not a reflection. It was an emission, a biochemical miracle that turned the jellyfish into a living lantern. It was, I would later learn, a form of bioluminescence used for defense, a dazzling distraction to confuse predators, but in that moment it was simply magic, a reminder that the universe is far stranger and more beautiful than our limited imaginations can conceive. Then something small and swift collided with the viewport. It was a tiny creature, no bigger than a grain of rice, but the impact was a detonation of light. It burst into a cloud of glowing particles, a smokescreen made of 1,000 miniature suns that swirled and eddied in the water currents before slowly fading. It was a decoy, a desperate act of survival. The creature had released a cloud of bioluminescent mucus, a blinding flare that would allow it to escape into the darkness while the predator was distracted by the light. It was a strategy of pure genius, honed over millennia in this lightless world. I pressed my face against the cold quartz of the viewport, mesmerized, feeling a profound connection to this tiny, desperate drama playing out in the deep, and then I saw them. Below us, a chain of tiny lamps drifted upward in perfect formation. They were not lamps, of course, but animals, a string of glowing organisms that moved with a synchronicity that was almost military in its precision. They were a living constellation, a constellation that was rising. I watched transfixed as they moved in a slow, graceful spiral, their lights pulsing in a rhythmic pattern. It was a signal, a silent communication between individuals in a world of total darkness. I was watching an animal I had no name for, a creature of the deep that had never been seen by human eyes, performing a ritual that had been taking place for millions of years. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated discovery. The thrill of being the first to witness something, to see a fragment of the natural world that had existed in perfect obscurity, was intoxicating. Ilara's voice came through the headset, soft and filled with wonder. "There's a whole language down here," she said, her words echoing my own thoughts. "A silent one. They're talking to each other, they're hunting, they're mating, they're warning each other. It's a city of lights." And she was right. The deep sea was not a silent, empty desert. It was a bustling metropolis, a city of a million tiny lights, each one a conversation, a story, a life. I began to see patterns in the chaos. A flicker of blue here, a sustained green glow there, a flashing sequence that looked like a Morse code, a repeated pulse that was a beacon. I saw a squid, a magnificent creature with eyes the size of dinner plates, that pulsed with waves of rainbow light, a mesmerizing display of color that was, I knew, a form of communication. I saw anglerfish, their mouths gaping, their lures dangling like a fisherman's bait, a single, brilliant point of light in the overwhelming darkness. Each encounter was a revelation. The majority of animals in this zone can produce light, using it to hunt, to hide, to find each other in an ocean that has no landmarks, no shadows, no edges. It is the currency of survival, the language of a world without a sun. And this is part of the reason so much of the sea remains unseen. Our instruments are built around light, and light simply does not travel here. We have sent probes to Mars, mapped the surface of Venus, and photographed distant galaxies, but we have barely scratched the surface of our own planet. Cameras go blind, radio waves die within meters of the surface. Sound is our only reliable tool, and it is a blunt instrument compared to the exquisite precision of sight. We are visitors who brought the wrong senses. We are like a man trying to appreciate a painting in a pitch-black room, relying on touch and smell, while the true beauty of the artwork, its color and composition, remains invisible. It was a humbling thought. We have built incredible machines, developed sophisticated technologies, and dedicated our lives to the pursuit of knowledge. And yet, we are still fundamentally ill-equipped to perceive the world around us. The deep ocean is a testament to the limits of human perception. It is a reminder that reality is far richer and more complex than our senses can ever hope to capture. The light show we were witnessing, this symphony of bioluminescence, was happening all around us, all the time, in every ocean, at every depth, and we were only just beginning to become aware of it. I thought about the countless generations of sailors and fishermen who had stared into the dark water, seeing only the reflection of the moon and stars. They had seen the phosphorescent wake of their ships, the glowing trails of fish, and they had woven stories of sea monsters and sirens, their imaginations filling the gaps in their knowledge. But they had never truly seen the world beneath their boats, the hidden metropolis of light that pulsed in the blackness. They had guessed at its existence, but they had never known its reality, and now I was seeing it with my own eyes. I was a part of a long line of human curiosity, of a relentless quest to see beyond the surface, to pierce the veil of the unknown. I thought about the evolutionary wonder of it all. The light we were seeing was not magic, it was chemistry. It was a perfectly evolved system of luciferin and luciferase, a reaction that produces light with almost no heat. It was a biological miracle, an adaptation so precise and so elegant that it defied belief. The animals that used it had evolved in a world of perpetual night, and they had found a way to create their own suns. It was a testament to the incredible resilience and creativity of life, a reminder that life will always find a way to flourish, even in the most inhospitable of environments. We drifted for what felt like an eternity. The 10 minutes Ilara had asked for stretched into an hour. I was no longer a passenger in a submersible. I was a guest in another world. I was an intruder, but a privileged one. The silence was no longer suffocating, it was reverent. I was no longer afraid. I was in a state of pure, unadulterated wonder. I had expected to find a desert, a barren wasteland of darkness and pressure. Instead, I had found a garden, a lush, vibrant ecosystem pulsing with light. The time came to turn the lights back on. It was a decision I made with a profound sense of regret. I wanted to stay, to watch the light show forever, but the submersible's batteries were finite, and the world above was waiting. As my hand reached for the switch, I hesitated. I wanted to etch this memory into my soul, to burn the image of that living constellation into my mind. I wanted to hold on to the feeling of being a part of something so vast and so beautiful. When the lights came back on, the world vanished. The ethereal blue fire, the pulsing green stars, the silent drifting constellations, all of it was swallowed by the harsh, artificial glare of our halogen lamps. The water turned from a canvas of light to a murky brown soup of floating debris. The jellyfish was gone. The tiny glowing creatures were gone. The chain of lamps was gone. It was as if I had been dreaming and the reality of the submersible was the waking world. But I knew the truth. I had not been dreaming. I had been seeing. The ascent was a blur of decompression stops and technical procedures. But my mind was still down there, in the twilight zone. When we finally broke the surface, the sun was setting. The sky was a canvas of orange and pink, a beautiful but mundane display compared to the cosmic drama I had witnessed in the deep. I climbed out of the submersible, my legs shaky, and was greeted by the crew. They asked about the dive, about the data, about the condition of the equipment. I answered their questions, but my words felt inadequate. How could I explain what I had seen? How could I convey the silent, pulsing symphony of light? How could I describe the feeling of being a guest in a world we are only beginning to understand? That night, back on the ship, I stood at the railing and looked at the water differently. The moon was a thin sliver, casting a pale silver sheen on the surface. But beneath that sheen, beneath the calm, dark surface, I knew there was a world of chaos and light. In every direction, as far as the eye could see, an entire signaling language was flashing quietly in the dark. A jellyfish was trailing its blue fire, a squid was pulsing with rainbow light, and a tiny creature was releasing its smokescreen of stars. It was a conversation that had been going on for millions of years, a conversation we had only just begun to overhear. We were in the process of learning its alphabet, and each dive, each discovery, brought us one step closer to understanding the meaning of the words. I realized then that the ocean is not a silent, empty place. It is a loud, vibrant, and endlessly fascinating world, a world that is communicating in a language of light, and I, for one, was determined to keep listening. The journey had only just begun, the deep was calling, and I knew I would answer again. I had seen the place where sunlight ends and living light begins, and I would never be able to unsee it. It was a memory that would burn in my mind forever, a silent, pulsing constellation that would always guide me back to the sea. The map on the screen looked finished to me. It was a beautiful thing, a tapestry of blues and greens and deep, oceanic purples, a digital representation of the world's ocean floor that was smooth, complete, and authoritative. I had spent my entire career studying the sea, reading its currents, understanding its chemistry, and I had always assumed, in a vague and unexamined way, that we knew what it looked like. The maps in the textbooks, the ones on the walls of lecture halls, they all seemed so certain. I had come aboard the survey vessel, the RV Nereus, expecting to help fill in small gaps, to refine a few details in a story that was already largely written. I was ready to add a footnote to a chapter I thought was complete. That was my mistake. The first morning, I was called into the map room, a small, windowless space filled with the soft glow of multiple monitors and the quiet hum of powerful computers. The chief scientist, a woman named Dr. Iris Coe, was hunched over a keyboard, her eyes fixed on a screen that displayed a starkly different image of the ocean floor. It was a patchwork of data, a chaotic jumble of blank spaces and indistinct, blurry shapes. It looked, to my untrained eye, like an unfinished painting, a sketch that had been abandoned before the details were filled in. It was a map of what we didn't know. "Welcome to the real ocean," she said, without looking up from her screen. She gestured to the image. "Most people think we know this place. They think we've mapped it. But they've been looking at the wrong map." She pulled up another image, the familiar, beautiful one I had seen 1,000 times. "This one," she said, "is made from satellites. It's a gravity map." She explained the concept, her voice a calm, scientific cadence that slowly, patiently dismantled my assumptions. The ocean floor isn't just a flat, featureless plain. It's a landscape of mountains and canyons, volcanoes and plains. And these massive underwater features, because they have mass, exert a gravitational pull on the water above them. A buried mountain, for instance, pulls water toward it, creating a slight mound on the sea surface, a bulge of water that is only a few centimeters high. Satellites, using radar, can measure these tiny variations in the sea surface. From that, we infer what lies below. It works, she assured me. It's a brilliant piece of scientific deduction. We can detect the presence of massive features, the grandest structures of the seabed. We know where the mid-ocean ridges are, where the deep trenches plunge, where the vast continental slopes descend into the abyss. But it is a blurry picture. Anything smaller than a few kilometers across, a seamount, an undersea volcano, a deep, complex canyon, simply doesn't exist on those charts. It's like looking at a city from space. You can see the neighborhoods, the broad outlines of the streets, but you can't see the individual houses, the cars, the people. The detail is lost. And then she showed me the Mars image. A high-resolution, incredibly detailed of the Martian surface. I could see individual craters, the ripples of ancient lava flows, the delicate etched patterns of what might have been riverbeds. The resolution was astonishing. You could count the boulders. "This," she said, "is what we have of Mars. Every single pixel is the size of a football field. We have imaged the entire surface of the red planet in a detail that is sharper than most of our own ocean floor." She let that sink in. Meanwhile, for the Earth, the vast majority of the seabed is mapped at a resolution where a single pixel is the size of a small country. We know Mars better than we know our own planet. We know a world 100 million miles away, a desolate, airless rock, better than we know the world beneath our own boats. I found that difficult to accept. It felt wrong. It felt like a betrayal of our own home. How could we have poured so much effort into understanding a distant, lifeless planet, while ignoring the vast, vibrant, and life-giving world that lay just beneath the waves. It was a humbling, disorienting realization. That was when we began the proper survey. The Nereus was equipped with a state-of-the-art multi-beam sonar system, a sophisticated instrument that painted the seafloor in sound. We lowered a towfish, a large torpedo-shaped device, into the water, and as the ship moved forward at a steady walking pace, the sonar sent out a fan of acoustic pulses, a wide, sweeping beam that fanned out beneath the hull. The sound waves traveled down through the water column, bounced off the seafloor, and returned to the ship, where they were captured by the receivers and converted into digital information. And then the magic happened. On the monitor in the map room, the seafloor began to bloom into existence, line by patient, painstaking line. It was like watching a photograph develop in slow motion. The blank space on the screen began to fill with detail. A ridge appeared, a long, sinuous curve of rock, then a scar, a deep V-shaped valley that cut across the ridge. A canyon, vast and awe-inspiring, its walls falling away into a darkness the sonar could barely penetrate. And then a seamount, a perfect conical volcano rising from the abyssal plain, its summit 1,000 meters below the surface. These features, some of them larger than mountains on land, were appearing for the first time in human history. We were the first eyes to see them, the first minds to comprehend their existence. It was a breathtaking feeling, a true act of exploration. We weren't just filling in a map, we were creating one. I spent hours in the map room, watching the image grow. The process was agonizingly slow. We covered a strip of ocean a few kilometers wide each day. Behind us, in every direction, was ocean nobody had ever pinged, vast, unexplored territories that stretched from horizon to horizon. The map was a record of our journey, a thin ribbon of knowledge cutting through an ocean of ignorance. I thought about all the maps I had seen in my life, the beautiful, finished-looking images that had misled me for so long. They were not maps of the real ocean. They were maps of our assumptions. They were maps of our ignorance. One evening, over dinner, a young research assistant, a bright-eyed graduate student named Thomas, did the arithmetic for me. The Nereus was mapping, on a good day, an area roughly the size of a small city. We were a modern survey vessel with the best equipment available, and we were barely making a dent. The ocean covers 70% of the Earth's surface. To map the entire seabed to the resolution we were achieving would take a single ship centuries. Centuries. The number echoed in my mind, a cold, hard fact that was both daunting and exhilarating. It is not that we lack curiosity. It is not that we lack the technology. It is that the ocean is simply too vast, too enormous, and too opaque to almost everything except sound, and we have been surveying it one narrow ribbon at a time. I went to bed that night thinking about how much lies just beyond the edge of that ribbon. I imagined the sheer, unimaginable scale of the unseen, the mountains taller than Everest, their peaks still unclimbed, the canyons deeper than the Grand Canyon, their walls still unexplored, the plains, vast and featureless, that stretch for thousands of miles, their secrets buried under millions of years of sediment, the life, strange and alien, that thrives in the crushing pressure and perpetual darkness. It was all there, just beneath the surface, waiting for us to notice it. I thought about the pioneers, the early oceanographers, who had first lowered sounding lines into the deep. They had measured the depth by dropping a weighted rope over the side of a ship, counting the knots as it descended. It was a slow, laborious, and incredibly inaccurate process. They had no sonar, no satellites, no computers. They were mapping the ocean by touch, feeling their way through the darkness. And yet they had laid the foundation for everything we were doing. They had shown us the way. They had proven that it was possible to know the deep. They had given us the map of our ignorance. I thought about the future. I imagined a fleet of autonomous underwater vehicles, swarms of robotic explorers that would crisscross the ocean, mapping the seabed in exquisite detail. I imagined a network of sensors, listening to the sounds of the deep, watching for changes, and communicating with each other. I imagined a day when the map on the screen would be complete, when every seamount, every canyon, and every trench would have a name. I imagined a day when we would finally, truly know our own planet. But I also understood that the ocean is not just a place to be mapped. It is a living, breathing entity. It is a system of currents and cycles, of life and death, of creation and destruction. The map is just the beginning, the first page in a story that will never truly end. The ocean is constantly changing. Volcanoes erupt, creating new land. Earthquakes shift the seabed. Currents carve new canyons. Life evolves, adapts, and thrives. The ocean is a dynamic, restless world, and it will always hold secrets. It will always be a place of wonder and mystery. The Nereus continued its journey day after day, week after week. We mapped seamounts, canyons, and abyssal plains. We discovered an underwater volcano that was actively venting, a chimney of black smoke rising into the cold water. We found a field of hydrothermal vents, teeming with life that had never seen the sun. We collected samples of rock and sediment, data that would be analyzed for years to come. We were adding to the sum of human knowledge, one narrow ribbon at a time. And every night, I went to bed thinking about all the ribbons that were still out there, waiting for us. The experience changed me. It made me realize that the greatest discoveries are not always about finding new things, but about seeing the world in a new way. I had always known, in a theoretical sense, that the ocean was vast and unexplored, but I had never truly felt it. I had never understood the sheer scale of the unknown. I had been a passenger on a ship, a student of the sea, but I had been looking at the wrong map. I had been using the wrong sense. The ocean wasn't a place I understood. It was a place I was only beginning to appreciate. When the voyage ended, I returned to my old life, but I was a different person. I looked at the world with new eyes. I looked at a map and saw the blank spaces. I looked at the sea and imagined the mountains and canyons that lay beneath. I knew, with a certainty that was both humbling and inspiring, that we had only just begun to explore our own planet. We are not the conquerors of the ocean, we are its students. And the most important lesson I learned on that voyage was that the most profound discoveries are often the ones that reveal our own ignorance. The ocean is not a place to be conquered, it is a place to be understood. And the journey of understanding has only just begun. The deep calls to us, a whisper from the darkness, a promise of wonders yet unseen. And we, the curious, the relentless, the explorers, will always answer the call, one narrow ribbon at a time. We found it by accident, on a transit leg nobody cared about. Those are the words that have haunted me ever since, the quiet confession that the greatest discovery of my career, the moment that reshaped my understanding of the world, was not the result of careful planning or brilliant insight. It was chance. It was the universe, in its infinite capacity for surprise, reaching up from the deep to tap me on the shoulder and say, "Look, I was on the night watch," the graveyard shift that falls between midnight and dawn, when the ship, the RV Atlantis, was simply moving from one survey site to another. We were in the middle of the Pacific, a vast, empty expanse of water that stretched to the horizon in every direction, a place we had assumed was featureless, barren, and uninteresting. The transit was a formality, a necessary evil to get us to our next target. I was half asleep, my mind drifting in that hazy space between consciousness and dreams, lulled by the steady, rhythmic hum of the ship's engines and the soft, hypnotic pulse of the echo sounder. The echo sounder was a constant companion on these voyages, a device that sent a sound pulse down through the water column and measured the time it took for the echo to return, giving us a continuous reading of the depth beneath the hull. It was a reassuring sound, a steady, metronomic beat that spoke of an orderly, predictable world. The number on the screen had been constant for hours, a monotonous 4,200 meters, the depth of the abyssal plain. I had seen that number so many times it had become meaningless, a background hum, a reassurance that everything was as it should be. And then the number began to rise. It was a slow, almost imperceptible change at first. 4,100, 4,000, 3,900. My eyes, heavy with fatigue, snapped open. I blinked, convinced I was seeing things, that my tired mind was playing tricks on me. But the number continued to climb. 3,500, 3,000. I straightened in my chair, my heart beginning to beat a little faster. This was not a glitch. This was not an instrument error. Something was beneath us, something that was rising up from the depths of the abyss. The number kept climbing, dropping with an alarming, impossible speed, 20s and 500, 2,000. My hand reached for the intercom, my voice a little shaky as I called the bridge. I assumed the instrument had failed, I was certain of it. No chart we carried showed any feature in this area. It was a blank space on the map, a region that had been dismissed as unremarkable. The captain's voice crackled through the speaker, laced with the same disbelief I felt. He ordered a reduction in speed, a cautious approach. The depth reading continued its impossible ascent, 1,800 meters, WFT 600, WFT 400. The bottom was coming up to meet us, a silent, dark sentinel rising from the abyss. And then the number stabilized, 1,230 meters. The echo sounder had found the summit. Beneath us, rising out of the abyssal plain like a cathedral, was a seamount, an extinct volcano, a mountain forged in the fires of the Earth's interior that had been standing here for millions of years, a silent giant in the deep. The sonar had traced its profile, and I stared at the screen, my mind struggling to comprehend the scale of what we had found. The mountain was more than 1.5 miles tall, a peak that would dwarf any mountain on the east coast of the United States. It had been sitting here, in open ocean, absent from every chart we carried, a phantom on the map. We spent 3 days circling it. The ship moved in a slow, methodical pattern, like a moth circling a flame, as the multi-beam sonar painted its picture of the mountain. The image on the monitor grew line by line, slowly revealing the magnificent, complex shape of the seamount. We saw its broad flank, a gentle slope that rose from the abyssal plain, covered in a soft, draping sediment. We saw a terraced ridge, a series of ancient steps that had been carved by currents and time, each one a layer of geological history. We saw a deep V-shaped gully, a scar on the mountain's face, a testament to the erosive power of the deep-sea currents. And we saw the summit, a flat-topped cap that was crowned with something that scattered the returning sound in a way the technician had learned to recognize. It was a texture, a roughness, a signal that spoke of a complex, three-dimensional structure. The technician leaned closer to the screen, his eyes narrowing. He knew that signature. He had seen it before, in other surveys, in other parts of the ocean. It was the unmistakable sound of coral. When the ROV finally descended, the screens in the control room filled with them. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated revelation. The corals were everywhere, a vast, sprawling garden of life that clung to the ancient rock of the seamount. They were not the branching, staghorn corals of a tropical reef, bathed in sunlight. These were deep-sea corals, a completely different, alien form of life, adapted to the cold, dark, and nutrient-poor waters of the abyss. They were fans and spirals, delicate, filigree structures that swayed in the gentle currents. They were colors that had never been photographed, a palette of deep purples, fiery oranges, and ghostly pinks that defied description. They were ancient, these corals, some of them, the biologists guessed, older than the printing press. They had been growing here, slowly, painstakingly, one tiny polyp at a time, for centuries, millennia, while civilizations rose and fell on the surface above them. The fish gathered in the currents that the mountain forced upward. The seamount, we soon realized, was an oasis in the desert. It disrupted the flow of the deep-sea currents, causing them to rise, bringing nutrient-rich water from the depths up to the surface. This upwelling of nutrients created a bloom of life, a feeding frenzy that attracted a dazzling array of creatures. There were schools of fish, silver and sleek, that spiraled around the summit. There were large predatory fish with sharp teeth and hungry eyes that lurked in the shadows. There were squid, ghostly and translucent, that pulsed past the ROV's cameras. There were eels, long and sinuous, that slithered through the corals. The mountain was a metropolis of life, a vibrant, bustling ecosystem that had been thriving in the darkness for millions of years. For a few hours, nobody spoke except to point. The wonder was too profound for words. We were not just witnesses to a discovery. We were participants in a miracle. What stayed with me afterward was not the beauty, though it was breathtaking. It was not the science, though it was fascinating. It was the arithmetic. The sheer, staggering, mind-bending arithmetic of it all. Tens of thousands of seamounts are thought to exist in the world's oceans. Tens of thousands, and only a small fraction, a tiny, insignificant percentage, have ever been visited. This magnificent mountain, had been standing here, alive and crowded, through every century of human history. It had been a silent witness to the rise and fall of empires. It had been a constant, unchanging presence while generations of sailors had sailed above it, oblivious to its existence. Marco Polo had sailed these waters, his ships cutting through the surface, unaware of the mountain just a mile below. The great explorers Magellan, Drake, Cook had all traversed the Pacific, and none of them had known. The mountain had been here, a secret of the deep, waiting to be discovered. It was a humbling thought, a reminder of the vastness of the unknown and the limits of our knowledge. I thought about all the maps I had seen, the beautiful, finished-looking maps that made the ocean seem like a known quantity. They were a lie. They were a fiction. The map we had been using was a blank piece of paper where this mountain stood, and we had only just begun to fill in the blanks. We had no idea what else was out there, what other mountains were waiting to be found, what other ecosystems were thriving in the darkness. The ocean was not a place we had conquered. It was a place we were only just beginning to explore. The seamount was a symbol of our ignorance, a monument to the vast, unexplored frontier that lay just beneath our boats. I have never again looked at open water and assumed it was empty. The lesson I learned on the Atlantis was a profound one, a shift in perception that I carry with me every day. When I look out at the sea, I no longer see a flat, featureless plain. I see a landscape, a three-dimensional world of mountains and canyons, of volcanoes and plains. I see a world teeming with life, a world of silent, unseen wonders. I see a world that is waiting to be discovered. Somewhere below the surface, there is always a mountain waiting. There is always a secret waiting to be uncovered. There is always a story waiting to be told. The ocean is not a place of emptiness. It is a place of infinite possibility, a mystery that calls to us from the depths, and we, the curious, the relentless, the explorers, will always answer that call. We will always be drawn to the unknown, to the edge of the map, to the place where the mountain rises from the dark. We will always be looking for the mountain nobody knew was there.